The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri. On this edition of Eye on Oshkosh, we'll be discussing labor issues, and to help us do that, we're joined by two people, both who are members of the Wisconsin State Employees Union. I should say that one of the members of the executive committee for that union, Mark Clemmer, was going to be joining us tonight along with one of our guests. Unfortunately, Mark got hung up in Madison. He couldn't get back here in enough time, but he did send someone in his stead. So we're pleased to welcome both Larry Lautenschlager and Paulette Feld to the show. Now, Larry, you're a member of the negotiating team for the Wisconsin State Employees Union, correct?
Correct. I represent the technical bargaining.
Okay, and you're also president of Local 48, which represents the Wisconsin Resource Center and Winnebago Mental Health Institute.
Correct.
Okay, and Paulette, you are president of Local 579, which represents UW-Oshkosh classified staff.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
very good.
And then I'm also secretary of the WSEU Executive Board, so I serve on the board with Mark.
Okay, terrific. Well, we want to thank both of you for being here.
Thank you.
We know
Thank
you've got busy, hectic lives, and this has been an incredibly busy time for you folks from a union standpoint as well. So we appreciate you both being here. Let's start by having you explain how many members the Wisconsin State Employees Union actually, represents, and who they represent. We kind of got into that a little bit here in the opening as far as what your locals represent, but who all is covered by the Wisconsin State Employees Union?
Well, the WSEU covers we cover 5 bargaining units within state government. We represent blue collar, administrative support, technical, security and public safety, and professional and social services employees. Each one of those technically has a separate contract that's individual, but we're all part of the same union, so they're bargained together. We represent people like custodians. My local represents custodians at the university, program assistants who work in the academic departments around the university. I work in the library. We have library assistants. I'm a technical employee who works with the computers on campus. Do you just want to talk about what Winnebago has, and then we can fill in the gaps?
Yeah, Winnebago has custodians too, plus the administrative support, which are our clerical people, resident care technicians, which is in the technical, which is basically kind of like a CNA that work in the hospitals and nursing homes, nursing assistants. Resource Center has psychiatric care technicians and correctional officers. WSU also represents all the correctional officers throughout the state.
About how many members are we
I think
talking
about 26,000.
Yeah.
About 26,000 employees we have.
Okay.
All right, and so a contract settlement was reached recently, correct?
Yes.
In July, and it was very stressful negotiations, wasn't it?
It was a 2-year process.
Two-year
This is
process.
the longest contract that we ever had to go through.
Why did it take so long, Larry?
I think a lot of it had to do with nowadays state and public employees are kind of looked as political pawns, and that's basically what this contract is all about. It was basically started out because the state was broke because of the deficit. They didn't have the money to pay the across-the-board increases. The governor had in his budget allotted 0 for the first year, 1% for the second year. But the main thing is with health insurance,
Right.
which came out of the last contract, out of the Joker Committee, the Joint Committee on Finance, says that they would not approve another contract of state employees without having some kind of state employee health insurance premium contribution.
Because that's what happened with the non-union employees the
Right.
year
Correct.
before.
Right.
So if it happened to them, it had happened to you also.
Right.
Correct.
What happened, the last contract, which took quite a bit of time to settle, once we came to a tentative agreement and we were before the Joker Committee, they wanted us to go back and renegotiate the contract that the state and our union had tentatively agreed on, and put payments for health insurance in there before they would approve it. And so there was a 3-4 month period that we were in limbo, that they were holding our contract captive, and that was when you'd see us, on the streets in front of the library,
Sure.
that kind of thing, having informational picketing, because they wanted us to renegotiate a contract that was already negotiated. And it was shortly after that the non-represented employees started having to pay for their health insurance, and we knew it was coming in our next contract.
But an agreement was reached.
Correct.
The union did give in on the health benefits issue, correct? You will be paying into for health care.
Yes,
now,
we will be.
Right, but not retroactively, right?
Correct. Well, we had to give up some things in order
Okay.
to do that.
What did you give up?
We had to give up our retroactivity on the 1% back to
Okay.
June of 2004.
So this was a bad deal.
This was a very bad deal. I mean, there's no doubt about it. This was a bad deal. I mean, you sit there and you get a 0 and 1%.
Yeah.
You have to pay more for your health insurance, which, I mean, a lot of people understand.
Sure.
That's the time. That's the signs of the times. I mean, we know that more, industries and whatever, their employees are paying more for their health insurance. But the thing that we wanted is we don't have a problem with paying for it, but we want to be compensated
Sure.
at a decent raise to
Right.
to take care of
And
that.
that didn't happen.
And that didn't happen.
Now all the locals had to vote for this contract, right?
Correct.
Was it close in any of the locals? None of the locals rejected it.
Well, we don't do it by local, but we do it by separate bargaining units.
All
With
right.
the
None of the
technical
bargain-
bargaining
All
units.
right. None of the bargaining units rejected it.
No.
But did they get a lot of no votes?
Some. One of the closest ones that we had was the security and public safety to correctional officers.
Really?
I mean, that contract, I think, actually passed by 124 votes out of 3,000
Wow.
votes casted.
Yeah.
So that was close.
Okay, Cheryl.
Okay, just so we understand, because I know that bargaining for the 2005-2007 contract is just getting underway now. So the contract that was just settled on, what contract years is that for?
That was for 03-05.
03 to 05.
Correct.
Okay, so again then, is anything going to be retroactive?
We'll get a small check. The raises were negotiated from June 12th on to, what was it, July 24th, when it was finally
Correct.
went into effect. So we'll get a small check for that period of time, 1% for most people. So it's
Okay.
it's not going to be giving people a lot of money to
how
spend.
does
Give us a snapshot, if you would. What did the union get, and what did you give up? I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but give us a kind of a snapshot.
Actually, what we gave up was we have to pay health insurance, $55. There's the state broke it down into tier systems this last time because they wanted to get kind of some control on costs, which hopefully we'll see that within a few years. But basically, they broke it into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is single is $22 per month, $55 for family. Tier 2 is a $50 single, $125 family, and Tier 3, which is the WPS plan, is $100 single and $250 family.
Now, why was the union resisting this? Because a lot of people watching the show will say, well, I'm in the private sector. We're expected to pay in. Why should public sector employees be any different?
Well, I think one of the things that people have to remember is during the 90s, when a lot of people in the private sector were getting double-digit raises and the stock market was going wild, we were getting small raises then too.
Sure.
And what we were being told, and the reason we agreed to those small raises, was because we agreed to not we weren't paying for health insurance.
Right.
And so in exchange for not paying for health insurance, we took smaller raises. And so we lost ground in the market, what state employees make compared to somebody doing similar work in the private sector. And even a lot of the city and county jobs is less than what we're making.
Okay.
And I mean, to kind of follow up on what you were starting to say there, Larry, what other things did you give up, if anything, and what did you get? I mean, did you get any kind of a raise?
We also had a thing called length of service pay, which was kind of a little bonus that some employees looked at for so many years of service. When you reach 5 years, you got $50 for every year up to 10 years, and you got $100. 15, 150,
Okay.
20 years, $200 was the max, or
250.
250 after 25 years was the max. So that was another thing that they kind of took away from us, that they said that we needed to use that in order to pay back health insurance, or we could still have, I take it back, they said we could still have that longevity if we wanted to, but we had to buy that, and we had to buy it out of the 1%. Well, I mean, the teams struggled, all the teams down there struggled hard on that one, because basically it's something that we have, and we didn't want to lose that and look like it's a step backwards. But it also, we didn't want to cut into that 1%, because that 1% is a base building which goes on for years and years, goes on to your base salary, goes on to your retirement, goes on to your sick leave. So we struggle with that really hard, should we buy into it or should we give it up? And we figured out that it was more expensive. We would lose more in the long run by giving up that 1% than we would to take longevity pay. So that was one of the things we lost: the health insurance, the longevity, the retroactivity that we normally get on any back pay. Those are the three things that we really lost. Some of the things we gain is they're giving us a $100 lump sum, which is supposed to compensate a little bit for the health insurance. They gave us...
Don't spend it all in one place.
They also gave employees that make under $13 an hour an extra quarter, and anybody over $13 an hour, you got an extra dime, which is supposed to compensate for the health insurance premiums too.
Okay.
How did you folks feel about the fact that while this legislature was insisting that you pay into health and giving you these paltry raises, the legislature, have, I would say, the best health care plan in the country, and they voted themselves a 4% raise? Were you bothered by some of the hypocrisy? I mean, these are the people that have created this mess we have. And were you upset at the fact that they voted themselves a 4% raise and they have they're not paying into health care?
They don't pay for their health care?
I don't think they do.
But see, I was told that they did. We were told that that the legislators have the same plans that we do. They pay the same premiums that we do. They pay the 55 family. 22.
Well, let's. I didn't think that was the case.
I think they do pay a
Right.
small
Let's-
portion.
let's-
I'm not
Yeah, I
sure
think
what
they're
it
paying
is.
the
But going on that, Tony, that was one of the things that was brought to us by Secretary Karen Timberlake of OSTR, the Office of Employees Relations, was basically, but you got to understand with this health insurance, we all need to share in this pain. Well, that's fine, but my making about $26,000 a year compared to a legislator, or compared to an executive making $100,000. I mean, whose pain is worse, mine or theirs?
Yeah, you're effectively getting a pay cut.
Right.
Right.
Well,
But, yeah.
and I think to that end, when this whole health insurance thing first came up, talking to my supervisor about it, who's a faculty member at the university, her comment was, how is it fair that somebody making $80,000 a year is paying the same amount as somebody making, our custodians, some of them make less than $10 an hour,
Right.
and we're all paying the same amount. And so, everybody was seeing the inequality in the whole tier setup. And so I think that's where a lot of us have issues with this, because you're basing everybody, putting everybody in the same categories.
Absolutely.
So as the bargaining for the 2005-2007 contract gets underway, we're taping this on August 4th, and it's getting underway as we speak this week. What kinds of things are you folks looking for this time around?
Well, one of the things is that we've been fighting for the last few months through the whole budget system was to keep what they call the comp reserve intact. That was one of the problems we ran into last contract was the governor put in the comp reserve, which is for our increases or any market adjustments. There was only about $55 million put in there last time. The problem is, out of that $55 million, joint finance took $25 million out of it to take care of some of the budget deficit. So there was very little money last contract to do it. This time, there's a little over $240,000 in there in that comp reserve, or $2 million in that comp reserve, and so far we've been able to. Our members have been able to fight with and contact our legislators and keep that all intact, and it's all still there right now. So hopefully, with all that comp reserve money still there, and the governor has put in his budget for a 5% increase, a 2% as of June 30th of this year, 2% as of June 30th of '06, and 1% as of April 7th of 2007. So, I mean, there's a 5% in his budget, plus all that comp reserve money is there. So we're hoping that we'll definitely come out with a little bit better contract than we did last time, because the money's there.
All right. When Jim Doyle ran for office for governor and then got elected, he promised he was going to cut 10,000 state jobs. And Marty Beal, who's the WSCU executive, right? He said if Doyle is successful at eliminating 10,000 jobs, agencies will disappear, institutions will disappear. If he is successful, we will see wholesale closures and the discontinuation of a lot of state services. Is that accurate? Is the governor following through on this to cut 10,000?
Well, things have happened. On campus, we haven't had layoffs. I think, well, we have had layoffs. I think there were 2 of them. But for the most part, the cuts have taken place because of people retiring or leaving their job.
Like attrition, you call
it.
Correct.
Right. And I think a lot of the jobs have disappeared because of that. But what we're seeing on campus is that, for instance, a year ago, we had to work with management to reset the amounts of space that the custodians clean, so they're cleaning more areas. We added 2 buildings, but we cut custodians, so they're cleaning more with less people. We have program assistants who serve the academic departments, who are doing 2 departments. The work 2 people did is being done by 1 person, and ultimately the people who are going to suffer are the students who are paying more tuition.
But the image that Doyle and the legislators have tried to create is of a bloated state workforce.
Right.
That's not true, Larry?
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, out at the Winnebago, I mean, we're working with the minimum coverage numbers as we can. It's the same thing like Paulette was saying, as people are retiring, they're just not filling a lot of positions. They're leaving them open. You know, they're not laying off people, which is a good thing, but they're not filling some positions that normally were always filled.
Well, was Tommy Thompson better for state workers than Jim Doyle?
Tommy Thompson was, let me put it this way, Tommy Thompson was a conservative Republican, but liked to spend money.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way to put it. He was a conservative Republican, but he liked to spend money. Tommy spent a lot of money on the correction system, because he felt that that's where we needed to spend it, because you needed to keep these people behind bars to keep safe. I mean, that's one of the things that I always kind of chuckle over when I see, these things on TV where, or in the papers where these communities don't want these sex offenders out in their communities, but yet they don't want their taxes raised to keep them locked up in prison. So it's kind of like, well, what do you want? I mean, you don't want to pay to have them locked up and to take care of, but you don't want them out in your community because, you know, you want to be safe. So it's kind of like, what do you want?
Yeah, but Tommy wasn't all that great for the university system.
No. There wasn't a lot of growth.
No.
You know, when you think about UW-Oshkosh, you know, there wasn't a building built since 1970, I think it is, and there weren't a lot of positions added.
Right.
So, no, it wasn't good for education.
And Doyle has been even worse for higher ed. Massive cuts. What has all this done to the morale of state employees? I mean, having to go through these protracted negotiations that go on endlessly, having to sign on to deals that you're far from happy with. What has that done, Larry, to them?
Oh, it's definitely tore down the morale. I mean, I get, you know, emails and calls from people every day saying, you know, look at what, you know, they're seeing in the paper contracts with even the different county workers and whatever. They're getting 3%, 4% increases, and we sit here with 0 and 1%, and it's kind of like, it's tough for me to say, well, counties are kind of in a different budget than the state, but even though the state actually cut some of the revenue to the counties, so it's tough for me to justify to these people why these counties are getting 3 and 4%, and we're just getting 0 and 1%.
I mean, do you feel, Paulette, that state workers, this is the way I feel, state workers have been made the scapegoat for incompetence, mostly coming out of the legislature. They have been as irresponsible with the budget as you can imagine, and then they looked for a target to blame it on. Right? It wasn't some of the major breaks they give to the big guys down there. It wasn't all the special interest lobbying. It was the state employees.
Right. I think that at least us at the university, in this last budget especially, it seemed like with the legislature, every time you turned around they were finding some other way to, you know, take pot shots at us. And you know, it wasn't us, the custodian cleaning the waxing the floors, or me taking care of a computer, who are the problem. And but yet the cuts, you know, it's like, we got to take care of them.
Sure.
Well, one of the things that the governor said when he was, you know, talking in terms of eliminating these 10,000 jobs is that it was being done for economic reasons and efficiency reasons. You know, I'm sure that neither of you feel that efficiency and being economical are bad things. What suggestions has the union come up with to try to be economical and yet efficient without having to have one person doing 1.5 or 2 jobs?
Well, we've come up with a lot of suggestions, employees throughout the state, be it the mental health system, be it the correction system, be it the university system, where we're seeing waste in our own employing units or whatever. You know, correction system, the money that they're wasting on special things for the inmates.
Such as?
Well, and Christmas meals. I mean, they give them shrimp and lobster and stuff like this for their Christmas meals, you know, and things like that. And there's different gyms that they're putting up for these inmates. The resource center put kind of like an obstacle course gym set, you know, for these inmates that are there to use. And it's kind of like, wait a minute, where's all this money coming from? One of the big things in the corrections was this last year was the orientation of all these new wardens around. They were having parties, you know, for these wardens and stuff. They never had these parties for wardens before. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars.
Taxpayer financed parties?
Yes, they did. Taxpayers funded it, and the department for these parties, and then all these wardens from all these other institutes were coming to these parties all on state time, in state vehicles.
Man.
I mean, so.
Well, what can be done about that from a union standpoint?
Well, we did some picketing. I know Kettle Moraine did a very fine job in organizing when they had the coronation, so-called, for their warden down there. That they had probably about 300-400 people out there, you know, picketing as these people came through, and some of the institutes actually stopped their planning. I mean, they had plans set for their new, you know, coronations of their wardens, and they actually stopped those, you know, because of what we were doing. So,
But you are serious. I mean, you didn't make that comment tongue-in-cheek about the shrimp and the lobster for Christmas dinners for state inmates.
No, there are some, yes.
Okay.
One thing that's happened in the last couple of years that I find disturbing is that the governor mostly the governor's office is allowing private contractors to do jobs that were done by state workers. And then we find out that the private contractors cost more, sometimes a tremendous amount more. Why is that happening? And how, as union state workers, how do you feel about that?
Well, and I think it's happening. I mean, the governor has a part in it, but also I think the legislature has a part in it. We just went through, as part of the budget, Scott Jensen from Waukesha had put in the budget to sell all the state-owned power plants, and have them operated by a private company, whatever that is. And it would have probably ended up, the state would have gotten a windfall of millions of dollars when they sold these plants, but in the long run, this company, whoever it was who was going to buy these plants, could have charged, there would have been no limit to the amount of money they would have charged the state for providing the steam or whatever to heat the buildings on campus at Winnebago. That was a big thing, and it was, why was Jensen doing this? Nobody ever came up with a good idea other than somebody must have been promising him money for his campaigns.
Another example that I find really troubling, we're creating a state voter registration list with Accenture for $14 million. Accenture used to be Arthur Andersen of Enron fame.
Right.
In Minnesota, they did it with state workers at $5 million. We're doing it with Accenture for $14 million. Now that's absurd.
Makes no sense.
We have a colleague, a friend in the union who's just been wild about these issues. He's he works for the Department of Transportation, and he's made it a crusade to expose the his first thing was a whole issue with road signs.
The roadside inventory.
Right, and they had a private company paying somebody who used to be a state employee, what was it, like 4 times as much it cost the state to have this private company doing that work than it did when a state employee was doing it. And they just railed, and finally they got the company taken out, and the employee was laid off, and they eventually replaced with a state. I don't know if he got the job back or what, but that work is being done by a state employee again. But it's just ridiculous, and these things pop up all over the place.
Yeah, and I think what people need to realize is that all this rhetoric about laying off state employees isn't saving a dime.
Right.
And it's probably costing us a lot more.
It is. And we even found out some of the jobs a couple years ago and it happened the same thing in some of the DNR positions where they were eliminating those positions, laying those people off, and then that person was working back not for the state, but for this private company doing the state work at twice the pay. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. You laid us off from the state, but now he's working for a company but making twice as much.
Wow. Cheryl.
The state power plants, I want to go back to that for just a moment if we could. How many, do either of you know how many state power plants there are in Wisconsin?
I think they said 20, about 24, 26.
And there were 270 employees who would have been affected by that.
Okay.
Essentially, every campus has it, and you can't necessarily, and I think that's where some of the confusion arises, is that you can't look at it as a power plant that's generating electricity. What these plants do is they generate steam to make heat for the buildings and that kind of thing. But it was the thought out there was that this was something that the state could make, or some private company could make money off of it, and there was the thought out there that it was a Enron, Calpine, which is an Enron spinoff, that was behind some of this. There were various companies named.
Right, and Mr. Jensen has brought this up twice. The first time he brought this up, he didn't get enough votes and it lost. But all of a sudden, at the last second midnight session, he got on a few more votes. I think he got some votes, because actually what we found out later is a lot of this stuff that they were doing was kind of illegal, and these people didn't know what they were doing when they voted for the disclosure of these power plants. So he just, at the last minute, he got all these, 2 or 3 extra votes, to actually pass that.
Oh. And was there a rally in Madison on April 21st?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
What happened on April 21st?
That was basically a rally that we were hoping to kind of kickstart the bargaining process to get this thing done. Because before that, there was probably a good 6-month span
Nothing happened.
that nothing happened. I mean, it wasn't worth going and talking about, because we kept talking to OSER and saying, they said, we'll come back to the table, but is there anything new to your position? They would say, no, there's nothing new. So we'd say, there's no sense bringing all the teams back in if the position's the same. So we pretty much sat stagnant for about 6 months, and we were hoping that would kind of jumpstart it, which...
Did you have several thousand people show up?
We had, what, was it 3,000 is what the Capitol Police estimated it
Wow.
at. And
Right, and that wasn't just state employees. That was all public employees
All
at
public
that time.
employees.
And we even had some
students.
And that was kind of neat to see,
Yeah.
because we were standing in the Capitals and they're marching down State Street.
Yes.
And it was really
Good solidarity
Right,
there
yes,
for
it
a day.
was.
It was.
Is there? Let's use that word solidarity for a second. Is there not enough of that today? We have a rally on April 21st, but then does it end there? I mean, do these various groups stay in contact and try to organize more effectively to take on this
We
system?
have been. This is really this last contract was the first contract that we actually sat down with other unions,
Oh.
and it was basically because of the health insurance, because we knew the health insurance piece was going to go to all state employees, no matter what. So we sat down and we called it what we called the Gang of 19 other bargaining units throughout the state, others engineering, WEPAC, WSEU.
There are other. The biggest group of state employees is represented by Wisconsin State Employees
Right.
Union. We're the biggest. We're what did somebody call it, the 900-pound gorilla? Or
Right.
And there are other unions representing state employees, and it's this group that got together regularly to
Right.
try to.
And we still get together,
stay
even though
together.
some of the units have settled their contracts. We still meet every 3 weeks just to. And one of the things that we're concentrating right now on is the contracting out issues. Making sure that everybody is on the same
Sure.
page. And I think this next round of negotiations will stay close together as a group, which we never did before. I mean, each union was kind of on their own, but hopefully this time we'll stick
I
together.
think we found through that there are some unions that we are sticking together with, but for instance, one of the first ones to settle was the nurses union, and that's a SEIU union, and that's kind of indicative of some other things that are happening within labor right now.
Okay.
So.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what the problem that we have, and I tell a lot of employees and a lot of members who complain about the health insurance. I said, and they said, well, our union gave in on health insurance. I said, well, we didn't give in. The problem is when that first union agreed to pay for health insurance, it kind of did us all in, because the state's not going to run two systems where it says these employees pay, these employees don't
Right.
have to pay. So when that first union gave in to pay health insurance premiums, it kind of,
And that was the SEIU?
and that was SEIU. That was
Yeah, most of the unions that settled before us settled with what we called Me Too clauses, that they put in there that if any other state employee union settled, at least on the health insurance issue, with a better deal than what they got, they would have gotten the deal that union settled for, which essentially what it ended up doing was us being the biggest put the burden on us that
Sure.
anytime we talked about health insurance, we ended up talking about it for everybody in the state, because
Yeah.
what commonly happens once we settle our contract, if we get something better, non-represented employees get it faculty gets it. You know, we end up negotiating for the whole state, and that's part of what caused the length of time that we didn't talk to the state.
And that was one, and that, now you're saying, that was one of the big stumbling blocks that we had, was these Me Too's. And the thing is, I don't think that when Joint Finance agreed to these Me Too's, we tried to tell them, you don't understand what you're doing when you approve this first contract with these Me Too's, because basically you're signing a blank check, because you don't know what the cost of that contract is with the Me Too's. Because the thing is, if any other union got more economically, that union with those Me Too's would have to get it. So anytime that we costed out something for WSEU, we weren't just costing out for WSEU, like Paulette said, we were costing out with all other state employees throughout. And that was our biggest stumbling block, is those Me Too's. And I don't think you'll ever see those Me Too's again. We tried to tell, I mean, I know Marty was right kind of in John Gard's face saying, John, you don't understand what you did when you agreed to these Me Too's with this contract. But I think that Oser and, you know, understood what happened with these Me Too's, and I don't think you'll see Me Too's again. Because we said, that's fine. If you want to stick with Me Too's, we don't have a problem with that. What we'll do next time around for the 05-07 is we'll just put a big Me Too on everything and call us when you're ready to sign. Because we'll take a Me Too, what everybody else gets, and then we'll sign it.
All right, Cheryl.
What, you know, health insurance, that's of course a huge topic no matter where you go, public or private sector. You had indicated earlier that a lot of your members are not happy with the tiers, the way it's set up, because it's not really equitable. Will you be looking to, you know, perhaps change that with this next 2005-2007 contract, or no?
Well, the problem with the tier system of the health insurance, we don't have control over the benefit package or the tier system that it is, because that's all set up by the state's insurance board. The only thing that we have control about, the only thing that's bargainable for us, are the premiums. We can try to keep the premiums at a steady, you know, froze, or, you know, look at very little increase. And basically what the governor has in his budget for this next time, besides the 5%, is also a freeze on the health insurance premiums for 06, because what they're finding out, and this is what we're hoping for when they went to this tier system, they were looking to put some kind of cap on the expenditures of the insurance company, because in order for insurance companies to get in these tiers, they had to, first of all, agreed to some kind of uniform package for adequate coverage, but then they also had to come with a underlying cost value to that too. So when this tier system first started out, there was probably a few in the tier 1. There was probably 10 to 15 to 20 in tier 2, and a couple in tier 3. But those tier 2 companies realized that they were going to lose income and members if they did not move into that tier 1. So we did have some insurance companies, HMOs, that actually dropped their premiums by $100 to $150 a month off the top to stay in that tier 1. So it is kind of helping a little bit, but it's a start.
You know, every state, every municipality is going through this with healthcare. Wouldn't it be so much more healthy, pardon the pun, for the federal government to get out of the stranglehold of the private insurance lobby and pass some national health care? Wouldn't it take this off the table?
Yes. It would be great, because basically all you're doing was, and we kept telling them the whole time, when you're making the employees contribute more to their health insurance, all you're doing is put a Band-Aid on the system.
Right.
You're not taking care of what the big picture, the big problem is. You're just Band-Aiding.
I mean, we're at the point now where the biggest corporations in the country are calling for national health care. They don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
No one wants to. But I don't think that's going to happen in any.
Because there's so much money in it going to politicians from the health insurance companies.
Right.
It's
Let's talk locally for a second. Mark Clemmer, who couldn't be here today, had made a statement in the paper that when we start getting service cuts in the city, he said, I think it's going to be labor people who are going to take the brunt of it. I mean, can either of you comment on that? I mean, the state has now put localities in a bad financial
Right.
state.
And I think what I see happening and some of the things that have come out recently is that employees in the city and county governments are going to start facing the same kind of issues we've been
That's right.
facing in our last 2 contracts. I think that's going to start happening to them more. You know, in the past, I think a lot of local employees have had, even though they've had to pay more for health insurance, they've gotten more money in their settlements, a bigger raise to compensate for it, whereas we haven't. And so I think next time around when they negotiate, they're going to end up seeing takeaways like we've seen, and paying more for insurance and not getting extra money as a result. I think that's going to start happening.
Yeah, and the county, we're taping on August 4th, and the county executive, Mark Harris, is talking about raising a sales tax because he claims if we don't, he's going to have to, or 100 people will have to be laid off.
Right.
I don't know which 100 people those would be, but I also thought, and I'm probably wrong on this, I thought that the sales tax hike was only supposed to be for property tax relief. I didn't know that that revenue could be used for general operational
know either.
purposes, but I'm probably wrong on that. I thought the spirit of it was for property tax relief. Cheryl?
Yeah, well, I was under the same impression. You know, locally, Oshkosh has forever, it seems, been known as historically a blue-collar union kind of town. A lot of us have our roots in unions, whether it be ourselves or family members, what have you. But as all of our paychecks are squeezed a little bit more and more, union members themselves too, you know, I think a lot of people in the community, and probably throughout the state, have the impression that union employees really have a pretty sweet deal. And I know, I want you to comment on this, because they say, well, okay, people in unions are getting higher wages, they're getting very good benefits, even though they're paying for some of them. They've got a certain amount of job security with contracts and so forth. Can you folks address those points that a lot of people are thinking that I've just mentioned?
I don't even think it's just union in general. I mean, what Paulette and I in Council 24 is feeling is state employees and public employees in general. For some reason, the public thinks that state employees are rich. I mean, that you make these absorbent salaries, that your benefits package is the Cadillac package. You know, gee, you work for the state, so you're set for life. And it's kind of like, well, I mean, years back, you know, I've been for the state for 24 years. When I first started, it was a job where it was a sole breadwinner job. You could do that. Over the years, I mean, we've fallen way behind the private sector, the public sector in state. And in fact, I have, it's not funny, but I have 2 or 3 employees that are in the blue collar, that their wages, and Paulette has some at university system too, that their wages are below the poverty level where they're actually eligible for food stamps. So they're state employees, but actually getting eligible for food stamps because their salaries are so low. I mean, I have 2 daughters, about 16 and 19, and they both work for the Oshkosh Rec Department as lifeguards this summer, which is great. It's a wonderful job. It's a good paying job. I'm glad they got it, because then Dad's not having to fork out money for them. But their salaries are $8 and $9 an hour.
Right.
I mean, and those are more than some of my lower paying blue collar people get.
Right.
You know, and this is a 16-year-old people, and I got somebody who's trying to raise a family on, you know, $8 an hour, and you just can't do that. And people don't understand that the state employees, you don't make these, you know, absorbent.
But I think what happened, Larry, was back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, when there were tons of jobs available in the private sector, for the public sector to attract quality people, you had to give some benefits.
Right.
And that's when you got the not having to pay for health care and so on.
Correct.
But what has happened from the 80s on till now, the private sector is undermining pensions, right? cutting so many benefits that used to be there. So now people look at the public sector benefits and say,
Well, yeah, hey,
right? So
Right.
so now you've got the private sector employees and the public sector employees cutting each other to shreds, and it's unfortunate. We need to be demanding that the problem gets solved.
Right. Well, and not only that, but you see so many people who can't afford insurance
Exactly.
at all, or who can't, they can afford insurance, but it is a terrible plan for whatever reason. And, they look again to state employees, even though they don't necessarily think you guys are rich, they say, geez, here they are complaining about having to, pay a little bit for their insurance. I'm paying through the nose and my coverage is lousy, or I can't get coverage at all.
Well, I think one of the things that's been put out there and that you hear a lot that comes from the legislators is that we have the Cadillac plans. Well, yeah, there is a Cadillac plan, the WPS plan that covers a lot of things, and everybody would love to have it. But if somebody wants that, they pay for it if they're a state employee too, and they're still paying a lot for it in the three-tier system. The HMOs that we are eligible for are pretty much the same HMOs that, we have the same insurance offered to us as most of the other people who live in Winnebago County. So, our plans are not that much different and that much better than, there's certain things that the state requires of an insurance company to offer to us, but, we're not getting laser surgery on our eyes or anything like that paid for. I mean, that is not happening to state employees. So.
Like, what kinds of things does the state require of insurance companies, for example?
I think one of the big differences that I've seen, and one of the confusions that happens frequently to the people we represent is it's something with coverage for eye care. Is that we can go to the eye doctor every year and get our eyes checked. Other plans don't cover it every year. I right off the top of my head, can you think of anything else that that's a requirement for the insurance that makes it different than your run-of-the-mill HMO? I mean, it's pretty standard. I mean,
and our HMOs too they've always said state employees have free health insurance. Well, it's not free because our HMOs carry the same deductibles, same co-pays as anybody else. So it wasn't completely free. I mean, we're still paying.
We're paying for prescriptions. There are prescriptions that we shell out. What is it? $35.
$35, yeah.
For prescriptions, so we're feeling all of that too. And
we got a governor's race coming up in 2006. We're still quite a way from that, but are the unions? I mean, the unions typically go for the Democratic candidate, and as bad as Jim Doyle has been for state workers, are the unions just going to automatically go for the Democrat no matter what?
For one thing, WSU hasn't always gone for it. I mean, we supported Tommy Thompson. There's many times that we've gone without an endorsement just because.
Do you see that happening in 2006?
I could see it possibly.
I could see it in 2006 only because you got one candidate over here. You got Governor Doyle, who's still vowing to cut state employees. I mean, cut state government down. But they also have Mark Green on the other side that basically saying he's not going to freeze your taxes, he's going to cut your taxes.
Yes.
So the only way to cut your taxes is to cut state revenue, and cutting state revenue is state employees' paychecks. I mean, so either side, you're going to lose state employees. I mean, so it's kind of like, what do you do?
And the nightmare I see is, in supporting a Republican for governor right now, is that we have the Republican Assembly and Senate, and certainly Doyle hasn't been always our friend, but at least in this last budget situation, a lot of the bad things that were in it, he vetoed.
He can veto,
yeah.
Right. Some of the major things in the budget that we asked him to veto, he did. I mean, he vetoed the sale of power plants.
Right.
The sad part with that is he vetoed the sale of the power plants. The problem is he can't put the funding back for the position. So now we got the power plants back in the state system, but we got no money to pay the people that work there.
Right.
I mean, and he also vetoed, the legislator wanted the non-represented state employees to pay more for their retirement, which he vetoed that too.
And we saw that as opening the door to coming at us.
But that would have been next.
Paulette, earlier you alluded to some national things going on with labor.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, the service employee unions, the food and commercial workers,
Mm-hmm.
the Teamsters, one or two other big major unions
Mm-hmm.
broke away from the AFL-CIO.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest split in labor since the 1930s, or
Right.
biggest change.
Right.
What, in your judgment, will happen as a result of this split up?
I'm not really sure. I think.
Were you unhappy to see this?
I'm unhappy to see it because I think it's just not a good time for something like that to happen within organized labor. I think we've got enough problems that we're dealing with already that looking weak amongst ourselves to the public is going to just make it that much harder to...
Well, my understanding is that the SEIU leadership had said that the AFL-CIO under John Sweeney hadn't spent enough resources organizing, that they just were wasting money on politicians. Was there something to that critique? Has Sweeney followed a bad strategy?
I haven't followed, the national AFL-CIO and organizing. I haven't followed that close enough. Our union, AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, our president, Gerald McEntee, is a supporter of Sweeney and has stood behind him. And so everything that we have gotten as far as communication with that has been, stick with the AFL-CIO. As far as our union, we're heavily into organizing. So if that's any indication of how things are, within WSEU within the past, although we can't organize any new employees because of the laws that limit us, we can only bargain for these groups of employees. We've done a lot of work to bring the employees we do represent into situations where we have closed shops more so than a lot of free riders out there. And just within the past 4 years, we've had 2 units. One now is a fair share unit. The other, the largest unit that we represent, is now a maintenance and membership unit, which means at least the new employees coming on become members automatically. And those are good things for unions. I mean, that's what builds unions. And we've done a lot, as much of that as we can within our union. I know AFSCME does that nationwide.
All right. Larry, what did you think of that national split up?
I thought it was kind of like, I want a little more piece of the pie, and if you don't go by my rules, I'm packing up my game and going home.
Right.
And that's basically what they did when they basically boycotted the national AFL-CIO. It's kind of like, if I can't get a bigger say-so in the organization, then I'm not going to come.
But the unions, I don't think any presidential candidate ever got more union support than John Kerry.
Correct.
I mean, not just money support, foot soldiers on the ground. They went out of their way to do everything they could to defeat George W. Bush, and Bush wins the election.
Right.
Wasn't that a sign, Larry, that there needed to be some kind of shakeup in labor, or no?
Probably. I mean, there probably need to be, because there was a lot of organizing at the time, but maybe not quite enough.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it needs to be a little bit stronger. I mean, I know us in Wisconsin were very strong, in backing John Kerry.
Right. Cheryl?
Just a couple of very general questions about how unions operate. When someone gets hired in one of the positions that you folks represent, is it an automatic that they must join the union, or can they opt out, if you will?
Now they don't have to join the union, but everybody who's represented by the Wisconsin State Employees Union now has to pay what we call a maintenance fee. and it's their choice whether or not they want to sign that membership card.
Okay.
The maintenance fee is the same as membership, so it doesn't cost you any more to be a member than to not be a member.
So if someone is not a member then, their wages, I'm assuming, probably are not the same as a union member's, or are they?
In
Everybody's-
WSU, they're the same.
Okay.
Everybody's wages are the same. They're represented the same whether or not they sign a membership card. Even before we had a maintenance membership in the administrative support unit, we represented every employee the same.
Okay.
Right. The only difference is a non-member does not have a say-so on contract. They don't have a vote on a contract. They don't have any kind of say-so in any kind of local agreements we have between the local employer and the union. They don't have anything like that. But other than that, the salaries are the same as everybody else. Representation is about the same. It's just that they don't have the say-so.
So that's the big advantage to being a member of the union is to basically exercise your voice.
Oh, sure.
Right, right. It's democracy.
Sure. Something that we need more of in
sure,
this country.
sure. Because I
at
mean, I
every
had,
level.
you know, just quick. I had a small department of 8 employees. 4 of them were members, 4 of them weren't members. It just happened that the 4 that weren't members were the highest senior people. So I said, we're going to do all seniority on this department by low senior first. And these people are saying, wait a minute, that's not right. And I'm saying, but you don't have a say-so because you're not a member. Well, those 4 did join. So now all 8 of them are members.
What reasons do folks give for not being members? Just out of curiosity.
I think there's political reasons that people give. I've had people with religious
Religious is a big one.
issues, and just contrariness. I think there's some of that out there.
Like Jesus wouldn't join a union or
I
something?
don't know. But I have 2 employees that right
He'd be in
now.
the carpenters union, wouldn't he?
I don't know, but yeah, they just won't join because of their religious beliefs, and no matter how much I coach them to do it, they just won't do it.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I do work with lots of young people as a college professor, and I have to say that the majority of them don't seem to have any interest in union activity. What would you say to people, Paulette, in the 18 to 30-year-old age group as to why they should be interested in unionization?
And I think that's true
Yeah.
from what I see too. I don't have children, but my nieces, you know, have no idea what all this stuff that I run around doing is all about. They just know, you know, she spends time in Madison, she spends time, you know, doing crazy things, walking around with signs and that kind of thing.
Right.
And they don't understand. And I think a big part of that is that the whole history of labor and what labor has done is not shared
No.
in schools. I mean, a lot of my labor background comes from my family. I grew up in a family. My father was a electrician. He was active in his union. I'm from Sheboygan. Both my grandfathers worked at Kohler Company, were involved in the strikes at Kohler, you know, saw what, you know, those kind of things do to communities. But that kind of history isn't there anymore. It's not shared, and I think that's a really big issue. And
Okay.
we don't see what people can gain.
Okay. On that note, we have to wrap up, but thank you very, very much for being
Thank you.
here. Larry Lautenschlager and Paulette Feld, both from the Wisconsin State Employees Union. Thanks to Tony, thanks to you, as always, for letting us into your homes for this last hour, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.